How could we thrive in the midst of facing mental illness? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is sponsored by Access More. Today, I have an amazing and courageous woman of God with me. This special guest's name is Katie Dale, and she is no stranger to the storms of serious mental illness. With personally lived experience and professional clinical background, she shares her insights to enlighten others on how to cope with and thrive despite a mental health condition. Welcome, Katie. I am so blessed and honored to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
Wow, my pleasure. Tina, thank you so much for having me.
I am excited to address this topic because having been a therapist and currently being a life coach, this is something that is dear to my heart. And I'm so proud of all of the people like you who are willing to share their personal story, because that is hard. That is courageous to share your personal story in order to reach people who are suffering and feel as though they're suffering alone. Can you share with the audience some of that experience that led you to bravely be authentic before the world with a book?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I came to know Christ at a young age. I was raised in a Christian home. My parents brought us to church and was actually an Assemblies of God when I was very young, for the first 7 or 8 years of my life. So I had been immersed in that kind of culture of almost Pentecostal, but very free flowing, spirit moving worship services. And we ended up changing to a non denominational church thereafter. And I was baptized at that church around 15 years old and had a very real hunger for the truth that was implanted. But that seed and that knowledge of salvation in Christ in my life had really blossomed right there at around 15 years old. And um, right at the cusp of that time, I was experiencing some changes and wanted to go to a private school that was a church attached to the church that we went to. So I prayed about it and I asked my parents, and my mom worked there. So I had friends through the church, and I had my mom teaching there, and I felt like it would be a good move from the public school to a private school. And uh, before long, I was experiencing some serious depression, uh, feeling isolated. You know, you got the hormones and then the nerves of being in a new place. And at that age, 16 years old, I was, you know, having all of that come at me. So it did turn into suicidal thinking and, um, dwelling on the contemplation of taking my life, or what what good God would let me suffer if he was even living in me, if he did have residence in me. What could that mean if I was experiencing these thoughts and these feelings of wanting to take my own life? So struggling and wrestling with that. And then my parents noticing took me to a therapist, a Christian counselor. I didn't really go into depth with it there. Then they took me to a uh, Christian psychiatrist who was referred to us by someone in the church, and then got me on some medication that addressed some changes in the moods that I'd been having. I believe it was a mood stabilizer they put me on. And shortly thereafter, I was noticing weight gain. And same year, that I changed schools. So I'm in the middle of the school year and starting to feel ravenous and, sh according to my memory, uh, stretch marks and things, showing up on my body that I was just like, oh, you have that self-image of, so conscious of that at that young age. So we decided to go back to the doctor who was prescribing and see if she could adjust the medicine. And unfortunately, the medicine switch was a real clean, like sudden, immediate switch which sent me up into a manic psychosis where I heard voices and experienced a real fright and night of the soul there. So after a few behaviors in school, they had me sent back to um, the doctor, who then had my parents bring me to the hospital nearby, and they had a bed there in the juvenile psych unit. I stayed 3 weeks there, which was kind of a long time. In the world of inpatient hospitalizations, you generally see 2 to 3 days, especially in the adult population with Medicaid and general, most insurance companies. But anyway, yeah, so came out of that hospitalization into an outpatient therapy, and then was able to get back on my feet with medication and talk therapy and recovered. Uh, Thereafter, went back to the public high school my last year, feeling like, I wanted to rejoin my peers from who I'd known growing up. And the experience at the private school was a little bit tender, and I'd been sensitive to those surroundings, so it was a little bit hard to see myself graduating from that high school. So years passed. I was recovering and doing well on my medicine, and when I met my husband online a few years later, maybe 4 short years later, um, we discussed my diagnosis at first, and it came around again 3 years later that I decided I was well enough to go off my medicine, and learned the hard way 3 months in and out of the hospital, that time around, with severe symptoms again, and the mania and the psychosis that comes with bipolar disorder, my diagnosis. So, recovered again once I got back on my medicine, and then started blogging because I've been a creative person since I can remember. And I've always wanted to write and express myself through music or art, some form or fashion, and started blogging in the World Wide Web. And that was about 2014. And since then have written a book and had it published, a memoir about those experiences in my 16 and 24th year, and uh, advocate online now, to online and in person, speaking to this topic, that, it doesn't, this doesn't discriminate. It definitely reaches most families. So, especially the church. And want to talk to that to you and your listeners today.
I'm glad that you're saying that you want to speak to those who aren't aware of what it's like for someone to go through mental illness and hospitalization, because that is not a fun experience to be hospitalized for a mental illness. I've heard this from clients of mine that sometimes the hospitals they're in are not kind. They're not wonderful places to be. So you were 3 weeks in the middle of that hospitalization experience. Can you just share with people of the church how to be compassionate to somebody who's been through that?
It's true. Unfortunately, it is sad reality that I call it a double whammy. We have mental illness, which is discriminated against at all levels, and we have a poor mental health care system that is broken in every possible place. So yes, it's very harsh reality. And I would say to anybody who has come out of there, out of a psych inpatient stay, that you are brave, that you are going to, you know, face, a lot of stigma, but and you probably have been discriminated against. I don't technically believe in stigma. I feel like discrimination is really the prejudices we see. And that's um, something that I just want to encourage you, to stay the course and talk about it. And the best way to do that is with family, to, familiarize and educate yourselves on the symptoms of each disorder, the diagnosis, once you get a diagnosis, the medications and what they do and how they work, and get involved. There's local chapters and support groups. There's NAMI, which is more widely known of, National Alliance on Mental Illness. There's also faith-based support groups like Fresh Hope for Mental Health out of Omaha, Nebraska, and they're all over the world. There's Grace Alliance, they're national and international, I believe. And there's many resources out there. You just do a Google search and you can find on those resources. But um, be kind to yourself. It's not easy, one, to live with the illness. A lot of people still have symptoms and side effects of medication once they're treated for it. So it's not a magic pill, but you can certainly have a life back to workable and functioning uh, lifestyle, especially if you are well-rounded about it and approach it a holistic manner. Keeping your social life healthy, your spiritual life healthy, your physical, and of course, mental and emotional.
And of course, we want to encourage loved ones and those who are facing suicidality that if this is your only option to save a life, then you do definitely want to save that life with whatever you can, even though we know we're saying that it's not a perfect process or system. You've got to use what you can to save someone's life. But on the other
Right.
hand, when someone's coming out of that, just to be aware that you're going to need to respond with a great deal of compassion to what they've been through when they were in that place. So how could people get support from you, Katie? You have a book that has come out. How could people stay in touch with you or get a copy of your book?
So my book is entitled But Deliver Me from Crazy. It's a memoir and it's on Amazon. So search Amazon for the title. And then I'm everywhere on social media at Katie R. Dale. And I have a website, katierdale.com. And then I do provide a free resource that you can download, print out, and fill in. It's called the Game Plan. It's a mental health resource guide there. You're going to find placeholders for your medication, your medical history, your support network, hotlines, and Christian, faith-based, and secular resources on there for mental health and all things mental illness and faith.
Thank you so much, Katie. I hope that all of you listening were encouraged to contact Katie and learn more about how you can be supportive or be supported for things that are going on in your life, in your family, in your communities that are related to struggles with mental illness. And of course, I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourishment.